do? Okay, everybody, welcome. I thought this gathering was practically dead, but it turns out it has been resurrected like the coelacanth from the depths of the abyss. So welcome, especially those of you who are new to the reading.
I never understood the spelling of coelacanth.
I forget if it's Latinate or Greek, but whatever it comes from is what explains it.
Yes, it looks like it's pronounced coelacanth. That's how I always thought it was until...
Yeah, it is. If anyone else would like to read, we have a beautiful sign-up sheet right here. You're welcome. There's the sign-up sheet. And this is the open mic. It is hosted by City Lights and by NetWest, which is the westernmost program of the North Carolina Writers Network. And if anyone feels an urge to join any of such things, you let me know and we will get it sorted. So our first reader is our founding member, Dave Waldrop.
Thank you. I was sitting around the other day and got thinking I hadn't said much to my grandbaby. So I wrote her a little letter, and I'm going to read it to you. We got new parents back here. This is copyrighted material. If you were to use it, I'd have to sue you. It'll be a while, though, before you'll need it. Can you hear me?
Barely.
All right, barely?
Hello.
Yeah, okay. To Ella, you are at a very interesting point in your life. This is your last year of high school. You're completing a program that has been laid out for young people with some necessary modifications over time. It's worked well for the masses during our history as Americans. It has worked for a wide range of talents and abilities. There is comfort in knowing that the system of education generally works well in preparing young people for their duties as American citizens and actually as citizens of the world and the universe we visit. Next, you will move into a part of your life that is not as much planned by others as it will be by you. It is your great challenge to step forward into that uncertainty with confidence. Many young people face this stage without a strong belief that they will be able to identify personal traits within themselves to develop further and apply themselves to a rapidly changing environment. Plus, some may not realize that their deeds should be uplifting and inspiring not only to themselves, but to others. By others, I mean humans and animals, as well as inanimate universal resources. So this is a time to take inventory. As you have learned from your jobs, an inventory tells us what items are on hand as well as which are not. What must be kept? What is to be discarded? What is to be obtained? With this in mind, I urge you to recall those things that have brought joy to you. What has brought joy to others? Joy must be cherished with others, relatives, friends, and even those whom you have never met. Additionally, it is important to remember those things that brought pain and suffering to you. But once remembered, they must, to the extent possible, be eliminated from your life. They must not be inflicted on others as a form of revenge or a means to slow down success or joy for someone else. Famous singer Joe South reminded us that when we try to hurt others, we simply hurt ourselves. He sang, "When you strike out and try to hurt me, it's a hurting you." No one can eliminate all suffering and pain, but we do have a responsibility to do our part. I know you will. Remember this. Too often people forget how they drove a fear out of their lives. I mean this literally and figuratively. You should recall how you learned to drive a car, and quite capably, I might add. on the open roads of America. You did not merely get in and drive one day. Instead, you watched other experienced drivers. Then you sat on someone's lap and steered. Turned the lights on and off. Turned on the stereo. Changed gears. You learned one step at a time until we began to allow you to drive on our own private road. You developed confidence. That is how you can go forth in your very own personal journey, one step at a time. Never belittle the good things you have accomplished. Develop known talents for the good of your own soul and for the edification of others. Interact with others who can help you find yet unrecognized gifts. Trust yourself. Trust friends and relatives who inspire you. We all need a great deal of encouragement throughout life. You are blessed with a personality that draws people to you. Love people and appreciate them. Show gratitude. Recognize past accomplishments. They provide fuel for achieving future goals. Do not belittle learning to swim, ride a bicycle, sing in front of hundreds, settle a dispute among schoolmates with kindness and understanding in the 4th grade. I am purposely omitting many of the things you have done. That is so that you can stroll back down memory lane and restore them to their rightful place in your mental diary. But keep humble about them, even while you recognize that they have built up much needed confidence. The confidence to act of your own volition and react with reason on the environment. You will need to discern what is good and evil. Then you must work for the overall good. I trust that you will. It has been one of my greatest pleasures in life to watch you grow physically, intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually. You have transported me back in time to my own childhood. You've helped me clarify things I need to do in life. You've inspired me to be more optimistic about our future as I watch you seek peace, truth, and joy in your generation. Thanks for being my granddaughter. Thanks for being a responsible child of the universe we occupy together for a short time. Thanks for giving back to life way more than you take out. As legendary rock singer Bob Seger said to his son Cole, "You'll be fine in your time." I know that because you're already fine. And as Whitney Houston and Dolly Parton sang so beautifully, I will always love you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our next reader is Matt Nelson.
Man.
You want to know this one? Never know when I... Yeah, just hit the red dot when just on one.
We go this way?
No, just turn it around, and you hit the red dot.
So you want it way far away? You don't
Yes.
want it closer? Okay.
No, I'm not.
All right.
Oh.
And you turned it off in between, right? So
Yes. Yeah, you just hit the red
I'm
button.
ready.
Okay. For those who know how I got started, I use titles to have a story, and I wrote these a while back when I was still doing the basically the people poems. But I really like these artists, and this first one was one of the harder ones because it said even harder than Boston, just because of how the lead vocalist is a part of another group, and I guess maybe they just kind of goes back and forth, so you never know when the next one is going to be there. But okay, but this is his band, and if you know who it is, wait till I ask who. The future to come is hard to see, and I don't know if the present can prevent the danger. I think in the pursuit of fame and fortune, clouds the hearts and minds of once many good souls heading down the road to hell from not having enough guidance to avoid bad thoughts and gutters of gold on every street, tempting everyone to stray off the path of safety to find peace. I said, the problem is that the house of dreams fell apart from no one waking up to common sense, cooling the emotional fire to barely a few embers to keep many out in the cold of society. I said, some people are torn in half. I said, between right and wrong, from not knowing what balance is to make it through the heart of the storm and towards safe ground to build a foundation so that the silence of the world can be replaced with laughter instead of moaning and weeping. One problem I've seen is that there are too many angel eyes placed in the bodies of devils, putting the innocent on the edge of falling from grace from listening to the wrong strangers, weakening the state of the heart to the point where it might as well be a huge gelatin mold, shaking just enough to keep people alive with nothing left to say but what happened here, and the sound of goodbye from a viol organ has to be one of the saddest sounds nature can make. Calling out louder than the heart monitor to announce the next vacancy and someone still young. So I know that the resurrection of the human race is possible, but there aren't enough noble leaders still fighting for another chance for people to get back on the road to glory and away from the despair tangled in the blue skies wanting to break free so that the sun can shine proudly once again, with the edge of tomorrow no longer obscured under a sky without even a few faded stars, and the darkness of this dawn removes a brush to paint a new day with bright colors to provide some hint that a fistful of heart can punch a hole in the unknown to lead the weary through a gateway into the arms of love, of forgotten friends to shake off the cold, and in no time use that rekindled burning fire to prevent despair from coming back to ruin the progress towards removing the darkness of society ever meant to dull creativity and positive thinking. I wish you were here, safe beyond the borders of misery, to begin your much needed healing, since you wouldn't know love based on having more material things instead of compassion. Save a place in your heart so that the next time you feel a happy moment, it can grow like a rare flower taking over a wasteland, filled by everything you've got to inspire happiness in those who need a little help in case some remain divided on how to get back to salvation. Keep tonight not as a time without the sun, but as a chance to heal and prepare for tomorrow, where you can walk the road of life without worrying about the next step giving way and not fearing the thought of the higher you rise, the greater fallback to reality is, with the idea of forever now coming to an end, and without any chance to try again to endure a hurdle with increasing strength over time to attempt to climb the mountain to reach a place of pure salvation. Say you will give life another try at getting it right, just to ease the pain constantly produced, so that the tears on the pages of human history never dry, to provide help in preventing further damage, so people can't rely on using their heart over mind, to find another option to avoid evil, to create another you that is stronger and wiser, to keep climbing no matter how high you still have to go to prove the world to the world, this is my heart, and no one can ever take it despite life, saying love's gone wrong, and there are no alternatives other than embracing misery. Standing in the fire to burn the path back to light, to build a bridge over the abyss while rising towards the heavens, to blind the sky from the return of its long-lost travelers, to share forgotten hope and making up for lost time, and healing anyone looking up and wanting a world where where the danger of love is nothing more than not having enough time to get to everyone. Never give up, as I said, if it seems to be a little less than friendly, especially if you have good friends serving as a barrier to keep the spirit inside us all from fading into total nothingness. I am just a messenger, and it's up to you to make the change, and turn away from grief. I've got my eyes on you, and I know that it's not too late for our fragile world to be saved. I found love in my friends who gave me the confidence to be more than just a face in the crowd. Said someday, said some still stay, only the good survive, but everyone deserves a chance to feel the light once more after everyone listens to the request to lay down your arms, said open them to hug a loved one. That's for that one. Okay, if anyone has ever heard the band Rainbow, there's a guy called Joe Lynn Turner. He's really good thing. You can find this stuff on YouTube, and this is his band Sunstorm. And it's there are actually some pretty good things. I was just poking around and I heard this thing. I said heard a couple songs and said I gotta listen to more, and this would be the perfect thing because it's short. Now this next one is a female group, and unfortunately I couldn't use all their songs because it makes me sound a little on the free side, but luckily someone has already read this and they're saying you chose the right songs, but luckily it's short. Have you ever felt stranded in normal life, watching the world go by faster than yourself? Some people have all the company and power while others are left alone in the darkness, trying to avoid the evil grin or the successful with faces that can make a big barracuda flinch. The problem comes from the language of love being spoken by too many forked tongues, from heartless people wanting to only be among the elite, stemming from others falling short. It said, sweetening the devil delight, and said, use to fuel, and said to fuel their selfish desires until they crash into the wall of fate on silver wheels without any breaks from being blind to the constant suffering of others. It's high times that humans get back to helping each other because it feels right, and no reward, so that when you see someone who is nothing but skin and bones, you don't hesitate to do the right thing, who aren't strangers of the heart in wanting everyone to have a good day. I think some people are an easy target to find, for trouble, and finding a quick support is very difficult, once the ambush of misery begins and there is no chance to find a crack to slip out of, to let the bad animals have their fun while you remain safe, running someplace without trouble. For these people, who will you run to when the tables are turned and no one wants help, from the desire to lend a hand fading away, from knowing who has made a difference and who has not. During the many cruel nights of being ignored, when just a soft smile would make things brighter, in a world where it takes too long to wait for an answer, and how to make little moments less bitter. You have to say goodbye. Blue sky to improve someone's life if you really want to be a friend, or serving as a needed magic, as a much needed magic man when all things have lost their luster, that creates needed fun to pass the time under the sky, watching everything below without making a sound, to one day hear the call of the wild, reaching someone who's tired of not living life without happiness inside, wanting to end their isolation and join others to improve that miracles can happen at any moment. Although the secret to making such fantasies eludes many, leading to giving up before these dreams can become a reality and pave the way towards a brighter future full of love. Seeing the wrong people get ahead in life with many left in the dust creates a very heavy heart. Making the few who have escaped feel like their progress, feel like a perfect stranger you avoid on the street, so that the love mistake repeats itself and prevents others from being helped. And sadly, it takes a long time to get back on the road home, from needing to often ask for directions with nobody home to inform others that they don't have to go much farther. If they remember, joy is a powerful emotion. It can turn a total downer into a wild child, meant to inspire others to take off into the world with all eyes on those who dare to be different and want to spread their wildness. Don't think life can go on without you, because everyone has something special to share with the people around them, to break through the barriers of normalcy, so that when the lights within can finally shine on the past horizon, to dispel the darkness of the past, to improve the future. With a dawn like a bunch of sunflowers stretching out farther than anyone can hope to see. Oops, sorry. Okay, wait. Okay, so if you've had enough of being miserable and seeing others, I said, sharing a similar or worse fate, always remember to ask, what about love? And try to find it wherever you can, wherever your travels take you, not knowing how deep it goes, because love is one of the hardest things in this world to grasp. So never give up when you can't find answers that comes without an explanation, said, or the river of life doesn't feel incredibly cold or sweeps you to a place of further insanity. Sure, love hurts, but the pain proves that you're alive and kicking, and they said to not be dragged into despair, proving anything is possible. So smile, and you'll be surprised at what comes your way. Okay, does anyone want to take a guess at that one?
Ann and Nancy.
Yes, that was hard. And so I kind of wrote it just because if you don't have enough heart in life, what's the point?
What indeed.
Okay, and that's it. And you can just hit the red button to stop it.
All righty. And we are proceeding through our list, and like Dave and like Matt, we will ask you all to try to keep it to around 10 minutes because we do have quite a lengthy list tonight. Our next reader, I believe, is a new reader, Cricket Woodward. Welcome.
I did notice that none of the mics are on. Is everybody able to hear in back?
I
Yeah?
thought the big mic was
Camera mic's on.
This one? No,
Yeah,
it's
that's
not. It's not. Oh, it is.
It's
Oh,
on,
it's,
but
it goes to the
camera.
camera.
Yeah.
Okay. Camera mic's on. This one's not.
That's why I have a secondary film, and I usually just make it a lot louder than it needs to be.
Okay, I just was here for the moment, not the
Okay.
recording.
You do not have to be recorded.
Mountains cast shadows on clouds. A rare event most never see. For most have only seen what they see every day in this world. It is a truth, clouds cast shadows on mountains. And therefore cannot believe that it is possible for mountains to cast shadows on clouds. Even if we have seen a rare thing, often we forget to know that our lives are so small. And most know a tiny piece of life constructed by brains, construed as the only truth, by aggressive words of proof, and bordered by brittle fear. And yet some know in their hearts mystery, wonder, possibility, and feel connected and are content to have no words, to accept that the unknown is and is more real than we can know. That's it. There they are, the shadows of the mountains on the clouds.
That's cool.
Thank you so much. Our next reader is another Woodward, Autumn Woodward. Yay.
So I'm going to read a couple of poems, and I have been thinking a lot about climate change and my relation to it, and I guess looking for ways in words sometimes to connect with how to go forward. This one is called Swan Quarter. There are gray sheaths of rain over the cotton fields, standing water on the road as the rain falls steadily down. 2-story clapboard houses with dingy white curtains hanging like petticoats of ghosts stand vacant by the road, Some have rectangles of plywood tacked over windows, one a new white door. Smaller houses built right next to the old, which have to hold the shape of the life that left them like a hollow locust shell after the brightly minted cicada has flown. With its weighty body, the casing true to each bulging eye, flared ankle, transparent now. The cotton leaves glow green in the storm gloom, balls of white shining. The fields were bone dry when we passed through here 2 days ago. The roadsides read names like Rayburn, Pungo. Pretty soon the names simply read Dead End Road, right on a slender street sign, like the sign the name of the street should be on. We turn at a crossroads where one of the cross signs points sideways. Road ends 2 miles. A modern sign says, "Keep North Carolina clean and green." Well, small angels, gray as the stones, adorn graves, and wilting pink morning glories trail over things next to the road. I'm here, sweetie. A parasol, bright blue with little red flowers, lies submerged in a slough with the rain falling down on it. It looks cheerful, though, not depressing. A silo stands gray in a field encrusted in vines, experimental crop plantings by the university, probably GMO strains, marked by small red and white signs. I wonder if they give the people here a feeling of hope for the future, the same way they inspire dread in me. Consider how something wanted becomes precious, how I don't hear about crops from Eastern Carolina. I see the slightly overgrown yards. Consider how when someone wants what you have, you come alive with liveliness. Then things begin to blossom and bear fruit. When no one wants what you have, you diminish, slipping into quiet emptiness like those houses. The person, what is around them, may be hardly different, yet in being seen lies the difference between thriving and desolation. Closed eyes of abandoned houses still see, from some inner pulsing stillness, the spare line between inhabiting and dwelling. And the second one doesn't have a title. Mailbox wrapped with roses, a dolly on the ground, slowly taking on the color of dirt and raindrops. In the swirling armpits of the clouds, the mountains pulsed with the deep watered green of summer. Nowhere did we find what we sought, though the creeks were full of water, drought slowly becoming memory as the greening came, softening the brittleness. Inside, the packed clay of people's chests, those places once fluid and luminous, now baked hard and cracking, tried to do the same. Grain by grain, something started to move, until the horror and tears began to slough off like silt banks crumbing into the river in June storms, where slippery, shy, playful things longed to slide belly first. Our songs, locked for so long in those places, suddenly flew out, a roar like a waterfall on birds' wings, plunging upwards and pouring downwards. A towie sings in the bank. How did we get here? Our hands are lined where they never were before, and when we pick blackberries, the lines keep the purple stain, like the scratches that pierce our forearms. When did the lines split our country so in two? When did they split our hearts in two like peaches, juice running away until we lost ourselves and could feel only the rough hardness of the pit, forgetting that under its ridges it was a seed, not a wall. too hot. Upturned faces to the sky, we let the rain spatter eyelids and hair, longing that it might free the tears that had been gone as the land dried up. Fertility and generosity were lost too, and we grew thorns, sharp and dangerous, like desert plants seeking to conserve their moisture. We had to dig deep to find an action beyond response to our environment, to survival where once there had been blessing. Aching, we gathered ourselves up to start again every day. What we made unraveled with every night. No more. Until slowly, without knowing, the fabric began to hold again. With a start, we had a glimpse of recognition of each other, of ourselves and warmth in our bodies, which had been hurting and strange to us. This is not an instant coffee afternoon. Steeping, long, uncertain, we wait, attention on other things. Clouds infused with light, swallows lifting in high release beneath them. Light unfurls in a silk scarf tossed on the wind across a march of mountains.
Thank you so much. We all know there is nothing less tolerable to children than their parents having their own pursuits. Good work, bravely done. Mr. Baker, Tom Baker is reading tonight.
I'm going to be jumping around a little bit. As most of you know, I've been reading from my memoir for the last year, and the journey through your past is not an easy thing. So I brought a few pieces to read, and I'm going to jump through them because I'm not quite ready to bare my soul too much. I've done it in the writing, but so I'm going to jump around. Bear with me. It just does me good to read some of this. The second part of the memoir, Call to the Woods. The journey continues for the warrior wannabe into the second part of my life. The Call to the Woods is about the life from the time I came back from Vietnam at the age of 20 until I turned 50. The woods saved my life, beat the hell out of me, and shaped my being. There isn't much humor in this section, although there are many good times remembered. PTSD can hide in the rafters of your life and be as unseen as a ghost, yet drag you through hell's fire pits. Most of the stories of working for the Hennessy's, for Hammermill, for Parton, and myself came out fairly easy. I was very lucky to have worked in the woods during a time when there was at least a glimpse of the old days of logging, and it touched me deeply. The wild of the woods captured my very soul, I think. And this morning I was sitting there in front of the fireplace trying to add a little bit to it, and this come through my mind. I believe we all like to be alone, at least to some degree. I had a counselor tell me years ago, trying to figure my shit out, that I like to be alone. The reason I train so much at night and like to be out there. So maybe she was smarter than I thought. I sat in the darkness of my living room early in the morning with only the flickering light from the fireplace bouncing around the room. I have been a morning person most of my life, since the days in the military, when sleep was a luxury. The fear of the drill sergeant forcing your senses to stay one step ahead. Later on, the weight of responsibility, never allowing you to get very deep into your slumber. I was an assistant platoon sergeant at the age of 19, in a war zone. It was my job not to sleep. Maybe a little late nap at night. I had 22 men I had to throw out of the sack. Your body gets used to functioning on the edge. Many can't handle sleep deprivation. Some of us can. Years later, working 2 full-time jobs, never wanting to be late, heading to a log yard in Sunbright, Tennessee, north of the prison that held James Earl Ray, leaving home at 3 a.m., be at the log yard at 6 before anyone came by. Walked in the hills of the cold country tar paper shack region. Be back at Reed Gym at 5 p.m. Work out, sometimes bike or ride. Ride up Cane Creek and down Worry Hut, sleep a few hours and drive on. It's a little sketchy, but trying to tell my story in a memoir, my thoughts. So thank you for listening to that.
Thank you, sir. Avram Friedman.
From
Well, it's great to see. This is the biggest crowd ever, I think. So I wrote this right after Bernie Sanders had a heart attack. This was in the beginning of October. It's called Bernie Sanders' Heart. How much strength and courage does it take to keep a heart beating when challenging the most powerful and entrenched forces in the world? How can the wall of an aorta maintain itself after 78 years of pushing outward against the pressure of a world pumping with injustice, inequality, and self-destructiveness? Every beat of the stubborn heart must overcome the resistance of a world that would smother it if allowed to do so. His mighty heart beats, and the nation awakens to the possibility of health care as a human right, not a privilege just for the few. Thump. Long dormant workers begin to organize again into labor unions, demanding that no one should work full time and still live in poverty. Thump. 150,000 Amazon workers gain a living wage. Thump. The House and Senate pass a resolution reclaiming the power of Congress alone to declare war. Thump. For the first time, climate change is an issue debated regularly on the news and in presidential debates. Thump. The legalized bribery of corporate money in politics becomes a liability instead of an asset to political candidates. Thump. Criminal justice reform, ending the private prison system and reversing the racial disparity of law enforcement becomes the necessary position of any viable progressive candidate for public office. Thump. Young people mobilize to the demand for a tuition-free public college education and the forgiveness of suffocating generational student debt. Thump. The Green New Deal becomes a viable political option in Congress. Thump. Thousands of young and progressive people are inspired to run for political office at every level of government to fight for a more just and viable future. Thump. The center of gravity of the entire political world shifts to follow this heartbeat. When Martin Luther King Jr. died in 1968, did his heart stop beating? Or does the beat continue in the hearts of all those who understand and carry on his mission? Bernie Sanders' campaign is so much more than a contest to choose the next president of the United States in 2020. It is the synchronistic, echoing heartbeat of the civil rights movement, the anti-war movement, the labor movement, the women's rights movement, the abolitionist movement, the anti-colonialist movement, every movement of conscience that has taken place throughout human history. There are other candidates who have seen how his message inspires and who have learned the rhetoric. But are their heartbeats in sync with the heartbeats of Susan B. Anthony, of King, of Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, of Mohandas Gandhi? The stainless steel stents that are now maintaining the blood flow to Bernie Sanders' heart are keeping the flesh alive. But the stents do not account for what is maintaining the world-changing heartbeat. Perhaps once in a generation, someone is born with a heart big and strong enough to maintain that beat. This may be the first and last chance we have an opportunity to elect that person as the most powerful person on the planet.
Thank you, Alfred. Our next reader is Gary Carden. He is well known to many of you
I may have a little trouble. May have to sit down before I finish this. Just warning you.
Welcome to read sitting down.
Okay. Not yet, no. I've got, no, leave them right now. I've got visual aids. I'm a good teacher. I'm an educator. You know, I believe in having visual aids. Okay. This is an old piece. It's been around for a long time. It's been around almost 15 years, I think, since I wrote it. And I've always wanted to read it again. So here I am. I'm going to read it to you again. It's called Christine's Watch. Originally, I wrote this piece about Christine Lassiter over 12 years ago. Back then, I was hearing impaired with an estimated 90% loss, and I had considerable difficulty in participating in activities such as plays, music, storytelling. At the time I wrote, I wore 2 hearing aids. They seemed to simply magnify my loss. First time I saw Christine, she was in a classroom in the old McKee building in Cullowhee with 24 Cherokee teenagers. I'd seen her from the hall, blonde, beautiful, filled with some kind of fierce energy. She moved swiftly about the room, reading. I asked one of the students in the back of the room, I said, "What's going on?" And she says, "Miss Lassiter is teaching us to write poetry." Christine was reading from a sheath of poems all written by her students, proclaiming each line with enthusiastic delight, leaping and spinning around the room, pausing to say, "Isn't that beautiful?" The room was full of inspired, smiling poets. Inspired because Christine wrung every nuance from every word, making every line shimmer with musical cadence. I suspected that she could have made the grocery list sound like a Shakespearean sonnet. I was smitten. Gonna need my glasses. I faked it there for a while. In the weeks following that poetry reading, I found Christine everywhere. I discovered that in addition to teaching classes in Cherokee, she acted in productions in Asheville's Green Door Theater and was a member of a drama group called the Playback Theater, and that she worked with the homeless people in Asheville and had participated in a series of poetry slams funded by a small cultural grant. She drove an old camper with a sleeping bag in the back, and she often slept in campgrounds at night. After we became friends, she let me read her play. It was called Only the Dance. It was about the homeless in Asheville. She cast the play from street people. She also wrote poetry. She had a newspaper column. When she came to see me in Sylva, it was always a brief stop on her way to a class, a rehearsal, a meeting, or a workshop. She was always in a hurry. I gotta go, she'd say, checking her watch. I'm already late. You just got here. Well, what can I do? I got 30 students waiting for me in Cherokee, and then I have a workshop in Black Mountain tonight. I came to hate that watch. We ate in restaurants, we attended theater productions, read each other's scripts, but that watch was ticking. Was never enough time. I frequently became angry, and I would sull up and pout. I'm sorry, she would say, but I got to do this stuff. Why? She would tell me how important it was to teach the classes, volunteer to work with minorities, the homeless, the aged. It's just something I got to do. After 2 years of watching her drive away, I asked her one night to promise me that she would come at some future day and she'd not wear that watch. She said. She had a totally fake laugh, but it was really her laugh. She laughed like somebody saying the words. Ha, ha, ha. That's the way she laughed. Okay, I promise. I thought she meant it. Once on a nature trail over outside University of North Carolina in Asheville, I asked her, have you ever been married? Oh, yes, she said. He's dead now. She told me about the suicide. She always answered questions with a disarming, straightforward honesty. I'd read some books about survivors of suicide victims, of guilt that was felt as a need to do penance. I asked her if she was looking for forgiveness with all this desperate activity she was doing. Perhaps, she said. That was a special day. It was a spring afternoon. We had eaten one of her organic picnics. We gathered up the litter and we put it in a bin. The sun was in her hair, and I got up on my nerve. Now this is high passion with us. You got that? I touched her nose. She had a slightly deviated septum. And she smiled at me, and then she looked at her watch. It was at that time a Mickey Mouse watch, and she said, time to go. And she says, Big Gary, we're going to talk. We'll talk for days. We'll have all the time in the world. I would like to think she was serious. She started leaving her plays with me. She took me to poetry readings at Pack Square, places I'd never been. I heard Jonathan Williams, and she wrote his poems down in a notebook as they were read so I could read them. She took me to Hart Theater and to a theater in Boone. She whispered dialogue in my ear so loud I could hear it. She attended a production of my play and told me all the comments, which were positive. And then she overheard in the audience. She even went to the Unitarian Church in Franklin with me and told me afterwards, "You should come here more often. Those people really like you. You're lucky to have such good friends." Christine had a genuine desire to make others feel good about themselves. And of course then she said, gotta go. And she was gone. She stopped coming for a while. We talked by email. She complained of headaches and exhaustion. She took a teaching position in Boone and commuted from Asheville. Her email messages began to be confusing, filled with run-on sentences, misspelled words. And then the messages stopped. And then I only heard by accident that she was in St. Joseph's over in Asheville. And I went to see her in this hospital in a foreign country, which was what Asheville was to me. She assured me that she was just tired. She made vague references to some surgery, but she was fine. And her room was filled with her friends, and they were all singing and chanting happy songs, and I hated it. All the songs were about sunshine. However, as I was leaving, a nurse took my arm, whispered to me, "Mr. Carden, there were tumors in her brain. They were like clusters of grapes there." A week went by, and I sent her DVDs and books. And then she called me. She said she was always mindful of the fact that I couldn't hear. "Can you hear me?" "I'll speak slowly and distinctly now." And I told her I could hear her fine, and she says, "Gary, I'm going to die." For a moment I didn't know how to respond, but she said, "We will have time now." And she went on to say that the doctors said there would be brief periods of good health. She said, "I have to go to Florida for treatment." And there was a long silence, and then she said, "Gary, I love you." It didn't matter, of course, those brief periods of good health, at least not for us. It didn't happen. The treatment didn't work, and after several months, Christine was brought back to Asheville, and when I went to see her, she could only talk in brief spurts, and for some 15 minutes we talked, and she used it to tell me how wonderful I was, how talented. She kept brushing my hair out of my eyes and moving her hands over my face as though she were memorizing it. And finally the nurse said, "It's time to go, Christine," and they were taking her someplace for therapy. She patted my cheek. "Gotta go." And when I rose to leave, she added, "Everything's going to be all right, Gary." It wasn't, but I see her everywhere. She loved all those little shops on Lexington Avenue. There was a photographer studio there where she had been a model, and her portrait was frequently in the window. I remember her at Storytelling Festival at the Folk Arts Center. When the audience would laugh, there was her laugh, which was ha, 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 very distinctive. Ha, ha, ha. She loved health food stores, theaters, dancing. She once danced with me on a rainy Sunday while Ray Charles Ray Charles sang every time we say goodbye. I remember her on my front porch at night listening to crickets. And tonight she read her poetry at Malaprops, and then she read at Jubilee Hall. I remember that the homeless people came. And I remember when we walked down the street in Asheville, the homeless people would actually shout at her, "Christine! Hey, Christine!" There was no physical romance between Christine, despite all my secret hopes. But I loved her. I think she loved me too. I know that's true because Christine loved everyone. We all have her with us because she's in our hearts, and finally time has stopped. There is no watch now, and finally she's here to stay. I read this tribute to Christine at her funeral, which was held at Jubilee Hall on Wall Street. The place was packed with Christine's friends. The homeless and the aged was there. As I was leaving, Christine's sister approached me outside on the sidewalk. There was so much noise I couldn't understand a word she said, but she concluded by handing me Christine's watch. My friend John Quinnett was with me, and he said, "You didn't hear a word, did you?" And he told me what had happened, that Christine had been cremated that afternoon. And when they removed her watch at the mortuary, it stopped running, and so I have it now, hanging on a nail above my computer. It stopped at 5:15, February 13th, 2001. And I brought her picture, and I also have her watch that was hanging on the nail. And this is, if you would, just put it up here on this table. And leave it, yeah. I did a anthology of my plays once, and since nobody was going to publish me, I decided to publish myself, and so I paid for it. And there's the collection of my plays, and it's dedicated to Christine. It has her picture on the inside. Question? Anybody want to ask me anything?
How do you read it now without crying?
Hmm?
How do you read it now without crying?
Without,
Tears?
well, I'm crying right now. You just can't tell it. I mean,
Me too.
He ran out of the plumbing, that's how.
no, I never could read it. And I put it up, and that's why I never touched it for such a long time. But it's not a particularly good piece. I know that. Not well read. It seems like when something touches you personally, you lose a lot of your imagination sometimes. Question? Anybody of anything?
Where did she grow up?
Where did she what?
Grow up. Where was she from?
Where did she come from? She was, she had a wealthy family in Florida, and she had sort of run away from home and came up to Asheville because they had all those clubs and everything that she was interested in. And she joined all those theater groups, and she did work with the homeless, and she lived with them when she worked with the homeless. She went to hospice, and that's why she was gone for so long. And that was, the last bit of about that with the cancer in your brain. And when it was obvious it was not doing any good, they brought her back. And the first time I went to see her after that, she was, she thought other people were in the room. And she'd say, "Gary, I want to tell you." And then she'd say, "Hush, I'll talk to you later." And there was no one there. There's no other people there, but yeah. Okay.
I just want you to know that an old fart like me had one good thing happen to him. Yeah. Thank you.
And it was well written.
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Our next reader is Marjorie Ayer, I think also a new reader on this.
It's Marjorie Ayer.
Ayer.
Yes, Ayer's a good choice, though. I'm a Jane Eyre,
It's one of those last names you kind of have to
Yeah.
accept what you get.
Yeah. He's gonna grab it, right, so.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. I've been working on a novel for a while, and Chris suggested I come in and read. So, I'm going to read a little bit of the first chapter. She wondered abstractedly if one could smell fear. The answer was instantly evident by the shared expressions she noticed of other passengers clambering up the gangplank, who readjusted their footing on deck, trying not to step on the person pinned next to them. Yes, that's what it was. It was the smell of fear. Looking about, she could see on the seasoned sailors who scampered about, loading and carrying one task or another, clinging to rigging and moving with amazing agility. She saw it in their quick response to orders shouted. She saw it in the expressions of passengers milling about on deck. She shared a common facade with those boarding and those left on shore waving goodbye to loved ones. It was an odd consequence, to be sure. It wasn't just nervous sweat, because it was only April, and still somewhat cold out. Oh, yes, she felt fear and smelled it. She saw it in the similar expressions pasted on people's faces surrounding her, the evidence reflected in their eyes, each anticipating departure on the tall ship, soon to leave the calm waters of La Rochelle harbor. Snippets of conversation were drowned out by the shouts of crew and passengers crying out or shouting goodbyes. Others, like herself, were struck silent, spellbound, seemingly united in a simultaneous realization that they were subjecting themselves to an unknown destiny. She was momentarily distracted by the shouting orders of a raspy-voiced Captain Frederick Bouderpaw, who had introduced himself earlier to her and other passengers when they checked in before boarding. He was a middle-aged, elderly, stout man with thick white hair and bushy eyebrows that gave him a wildly whimsical look. His appearance was distractedly deceptive, for it didn't match his voice nor his commanding demeanor. She nearly broke into laughter at the absurdity of it all, for if she didn't, she might scream from the fright strangling her throat. She hated feeling out of sorts, of not belonging. Taking a deep breath of sea air, she hoped her rising nausea would subside. True, it was her first time aboard such a vessel, but she had sailed with her father when he was alive. This was unacceptable. She never got seasick. She pressed a hand to her stomach and swallowed slowly. 3 deep breaths, she told herself, would force the tingling and rising saliva down. Shielding her eyes from the penetrating sun's rays with a lace-covered hand, she watched in awe as billowing sheets of canvas were quickly pulled taut against wind-induced resistance. The mast rigging creaked. The entire ship seemed to groan from the exerted efforts of scrambling crew members, tugging, hoisting, and tossing ropes about the deck. She stepped forward, then back quickly, when their efforts resulted in a significant lunge of the ship. "We are moving," she heard voices stating the obvious as the ship eased forward. Passengers standing about the deck quickly readjusted their footing, and the volume of conversations intensified, and people began to shout. The atmosphere erupted in a chaotic symphony comprising seagulls squawking, women crying, men hollering, animals bleating, and shouts relayed from both passengers and their loved ones on shore, tearfully waving farewells. Anne suddenly reached her hand into the air to join in the foray, until she realized she was the only one saying goodbye to her homeland, and no one in particular. She never felt so alone among so many people. The Dutch vessel, oddly named the Pot de Brou, slowly careened forward, and the cheers from the docks rose, and those on board slowly decreased, fighting the moistness clouding her eyes. Anne Garol dit Trullier wondered briefly if it were too late to change her mind. She peered over the railing, fighting her anxious uncertainties of the imminent crossing underway. She wondered how secure the ship would be on its singular charter to Nouvelle France. Taking another quick glimpse at the water below, she gripped the railing with both hands and began to tremble. The creaking craft reverberated between her hands, and she stared at the Tour de Saint Nicolas on her left, and as the ship eased past the Tour de la Chaîne on her right. She started to breathe faster, trying not to panic. Was she really leaving the tranquil harbor of La Rochelle, France? Slight gloved hands reached out and securely covered her own. "Oh, mayhap you are thinking of jumping, are you not?" whispered a woman to Anne's right, who assertively slipped her arm through her elbow. The taller woman squeezed closer to provide comfort and continued nervously jabbering. "'Twould be a terribly embarrassing ordeal, my dear. Surely it would. A spectacle, to be sure, unless you are a very good swimmer. Think of it, the immense splash and the erratic thrashing you would make, kicking and wrestling with the weight of your skirts, pinning your legs, dragging you down, 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 towards the keel beneath the ship." "What?" Anne's jaw dropped, and she looked at the woman squeezing her arm with disbelief, as this young woman kept talking without nary a breath. Dressed in a similar blue wool coat that was much too small for the woman who clutched her arm, continued on. "Now I truly think, if you were to perch yourself on the railing and leap far abreast of the ship's quake, you might—" "Enough!" Shocked at someone reading her thoughts, Anne straightened her spine. "Mademoiselle!" She couldn't believe the audacity of this bold woman. "What? Your imagination has got the better of you, or mayhap you have judged the matter yourself," she rejoined, looking for the first time into the eyes of the lanky woman who had taken such a remarkably firm grasp about her arm. Forthwith, both women embraced and shook with laughter at the absurdity of the picture drawn in their mind's eye. Then, just as quickly, they turned and silently held hands, transfixed. On the shoreline, both dressed in matching blue travel clothes and black low-heeled boots. They stood in silence, mesmerized. The ship eased gradually past the Tour de Lanterne, the lighthouse that lit the harbor's entrance to La Rochelle since medieval days. The conversations on board faded away, and their vessel sped as it slipped into the Bay of Biscay. Soon they would head out into the Atlantic Ocean itself, and shores of France would shrink away. Neither said anything, not wanting to break their new bond of friendship, and the implicit sadness they shared watching their homeland disappear until they could detect only a smattering of white cliffs dissolve from view.
Ma'am. Sherry Durando. Sherry.
Well, you're supposed to pour the powder in.
Oh, no, I just needed some water.
Oh,
That's
okay. Oh, cold one.
Oh, forgive me if I burst into a fit of coughing, but for those of you who haven't been here before, these poems come from a volume I'm calling The Fisher Queen, and they are about well, a lot of things, but they start with my grandmother's and work their way through my experiences as a young girl in the turbulent 60s South. And these are just a few poems from that volume. This is called Deus Ex Machina, 1957. First came the cold, then the stumbling clank and rumble of the unknown that triggered the jolt and the hollowing out.
Something had stirred beneath the old-fashioned grate, a wrought iron wicker that could brand tender skin with angry lines. All a child knew was something lurked under that fretwork, growling beneath dark metal scales, its glittery refuse wafting in the updraft of its beastly spew, the source of both comfort and fear. Deus ex machina we translate now as ghost in the machine, but it's really God in the machine. So, bliss. Born too late to be part of the greatest, too soon an agrarian for the beat, she came of age in an age in between, that part of a generation still born at home. It was after the dust of war settled, when greed exploited peace and fear to distract reason, that Snow White and her dwarfs commenced mining the suburbs, their trove of gadgets and widgets, temptation, even for a bride intent on heaven. A capitulation devoutly wished that grew from need into tenet of faith. The evidence of things seen turned asset, cul-de-sac in the subdivision of myth. And this is about my great-grandmother, a formidable woman. Cruel work. This matriarch dominated the stifling air, her 80-year-old head wrapped in a severe swath of proper salt and pepper she'd stitch every day into a Victorian bun. She was covered from head to toe, even in the swelter of unrelenting heat, her resolution mortised into a perpetual grimace that barely hitched at the pinch of living claws she'd ripped from the sockets of her immediate foe. To her, everything was battle, so the red swell seemed just nominal war wound, the bloody brine erupting from the shelling racket of bone and pincer, a necessary evil in her campaign against the agitated bushel of Jimmies and Sallies she'd wrestled from the river herself. A tableau that terrified a 6-year-old girl, the hollow, merciless clacking, such a grotesque parody of a gentler grandmother's melodious handiwork, that soothing canticle of Afghans and booties, so anathema to this gritty, articulated dissonance. But grit was the grist for this family's mill, and she, the image of Southern womanhood, the beauty who bore a brood of 10, good cook, good housekeeper, keeper of the flame, and later, strong woman epitomized, the real head of the family, an authoritarian extraordinaire, a holy terror who brooked no defiance, yet one who threw herself between ruin and her husband, a knife and her daughter, absolution and punishment, her children and tolerance. I may have read this before, but I'm not really sure. So, this is called Filling Station at Ferguson Crossroads, 1959. The glaring white sidewalk blinds her, and the girl stumbles over a curb. She grapples for purchase at a doorway, but fumbles at a threshold, falling through it, landing on her hands and knees, a broken flag articulating beneath her weight, leaving impressions like inverted culverts. There's limey residue under a sink, a corrosion eating away at a glimmer of steel that skewers a crumbling wall. All around her, a smell like her grandfather's tool shed unsettles her, arousing a child's slumbering knowledge of decay, with a peripheral fear of something that taints the air. A malaise she can't yet connect to the flocked veins of neglect bulging through coats of whitewash, skeins of rot that mar the surface, hinting at disregard, like lines on a dissolute face. Suddenly, dark arms are pulling her from the room, her flailing legs upsetting the edict propped against the jamb, as a distant voice cackles a word in deep Southern phonetics. My grandfather owned a filling station. It was at Ferguson Crossroads, and there was when I was a child, there were 3 bathrooms. And I went into the third accidentally, not knowing what it was or what it was about. But I noticed a lot of things. The last one is called Eidos, and it's a narrative poem, so a little bit easier on the ear, I think maybe. In the beginning, there were only 2 books. The first was covered in scratchy burlap that pictured 2 children not having much fun with a dog. Inside, a tracery of black lines filled with yellow and tan and pink and blue. A pastel primer, were it not for the dirt. A crosshatch of battleship gray littered with serpentine squiggles. The other book was thick but easy to bend, its pages crackling like a candy wrapper. Her daddy had called this book Good. And it was filled with sticks, circles, half loops, upside down, flipped right side up, bits and pieces of sound that reminded her of the punch cards in her mother's business office. She couldn't wait to know this book's secrets. Why every line moved in the same direction. Why those gentle red words were only for Christmas and Easter. Or why some rows looked full and even, like her uncle's cornfield, while others seemed stretched. Justified, her mother had called them. Something that made the pages look like sand after a broken promise of rain. The kind of shower Mama said wouldn't fill a thimble. Thank you.
And Matt has asked to wrap us up with one more piece.
Okay. I had a lot more fun with this thing. It's actually an artist I've already done. So if you hear the song, hear the song titles, just give it a moment to let me finish. But also there is an overlying. So the title is not the actual artist, but an event, and I'll tell you why it's kind of special. Okay. Where are we now but another year older and wiser, with many more wonders to come? Said, the changes in life can do so many things, not only to us, but those we teach and learn from. So let's dance in celebration instead of your birth. It said, and everything that has led up to this special date. It said, to remember how we can all be heroes at any point in our lives whenever others need support, after having a black star over their heads for so long that they can't recall compassion's joy. No matter where we come from, said, we are hungry men and women wanting a bite of the glory It said, lying beyond the horizon that leads to the golden years where everyone lives in peace, where young Americans can still feel like the world isn't so scary and never being afraid to admit that it ain't easy being a part of the human race when it's easier to not care about neighbors unable to find their way through society with fascination with acquiring pointless riches. I said, when the prettiest star could be in the smile of someone wanting others to step out of misery, to see the days that can be spent with new friends who want to learn something special, to build a better future, and hopefully, it said, bring light to others as you have done to others before. I know that humans might be the biggest space oddity out there, but we exist to keep things interesting until we meet another starman eager to share our experience and discover a new path to find more new angels of promise to prove that others still believe in us when we found ourselves wandering through the dark as the world falls down to prevent light from finding another kindred soul to take others, to take others ready to learn on a fantastic voyage, discover hidden skills underground in the shadows of one's mind that allows doubt to breed until we see a bright light telling us the next day can be completely different as long as you make the effort to take the next step and be a rebel against the world who wants to remain as we are without glory. Remember that the power to change the world lies within you, and it must be held onto in order to bring others into the light so they don't have to be afraid of not getting things right on the first try, because it takes a great effort to find your heart amongst the storm called existence. So if you can see me in your mind and heart, then it means I'll never be able to forget you or our time together dancing out in space with all those who wanted to be far more than ordinary. So with everyone thinking that good things were to come when I met you. Really? No one? Well, yeah, that was another tribute to David Bowie, and oddly enough, one of the people that recently had a birthday she actually has the same birthday as him, and oddly enough, it's actually my younger niece's 3rd birthday today, so I figured, this would be one chance to say, I'm still thinking about you, even though the last time I saw you were at that awkward phase of just barely being able to pull yourself up and looking around, thing, and I also remembered that it was only recently remembered that it was Gary's birthday coming up, and figured might as well have a little something for him too. So thank you.
That concludes our reading for tonight. Our next reading is going to be February 21st. That is also a Friday evening.